There is a set of photographs of the sky, taken years before the space age began, that seem to show something already up there. On the night of July 19th, 1952, on a mountaintop in Southern California, a camera the size of a small house was doing what it did every clear night, soaking starlight into a square of glass for nearly an hour. Somewhere in that hour, 3 new stars appeared, bright ones, sitting in a neat row. 50 minutes later, the same camera photographed the same patch of sky. The 3 stars were gone, not faded, gone. And in every image taken since, including some from telescopes that see 60 million times fainter than your eye, that patch of sky is empty. Now the detail that keeps people awake. The first human object ever to reach orbit, Sputnik, launched in October of 1957. This plate was exposed 5 years earlier. Whatever flashed above Palomar Mountain that night, it was up there before we knew how to be. Tonight, we open one of the strangest case files in modern astronomy. Thousands of lights photographed in a sky that was supposed to be empty, and the 3 explanations left standing: a flaw in the glass, a trick of nature, or someone else's hardware parked over our heads, watching us learn to split the atom. The camera on that mountain was the 48-inch Schmidt telescope of Palomar Observatory, and in 1949 it began one of the great quiet projects of the 20th century, photographing the entire northern sky onto glass. The National Geographic Society paid for it, the same people who printed maps of jungles, now bankrolling a map of everything else. Each plate swallowed a patch of sky wide enough to hold 180 full moons, and night after night for nearly a decade, the squares of glass stacked up until the whole visible universe sat in an archive. Nobody involved thought of it as a time machine, but glass doesn't forget. Those plates hold something no telescope on Earth can ever capture again: the sky from before humanity touched it, before the first satellite, before the first piece of debris, a sky with a clean conscience. Which is precisely why, 70 years later, one astronomer went looking through them. She was hunting for something that should not exist. Her name is Beatrice Villaroel, an astrophysicist at Stockholm University, and her project carries a wonderfully unsettling name: VASCO, Vanishing and Appearing Sources During a Century of Observations. The idea was simple and audacious. Compare the plates from the 50s with the modern sky, and find stars that have disappeared. Understand what a disappearing star would mean. Stars don't switch off, they die loudly. We made an entire film about that 1 second. Or they fade over millions of years. A star that shines in 1950 and is simply absent today has skipped every rule of physics we know. The polite explanation is a star collapsing directly into a black hole. Lights out, no explosion. The impolite explanation is that somebody built something around it. So the team compared roughly 600,000 old sources against the modern sky, hunting for vanished stars. And along the way, they stumbled into something they weren't looking for. Not lights that had vanished from the sky. Lights that had visited it. Across 635 plates, they cataloged just over 100,000 of them, point sources, indistinguishable from stars, that appear on exactly one photograph and no other. Not on the plate taken 50 minutes earlier, not on the plate taken the night after, not in any survey since. One flash, then nothing, forever. Before we go further, let's do what any honest detective does and try to kill the mystery. Could they be asteroids? No. And here the physics is lovely. These plates were exposed for close to an hour. Anything moving through the frame smears into a streak, the way car headlights become ribbons in a long exposure photo of a city. These are not streaks. They are perfect star-like points. And a point on a 50-minute exposure means the flash lasted less than a second, from something that was not crossing the sky. Could they be stars that flare? Then the star would still be there in the dark. The Gran Telescopio Canarias, 10 meters of mirror, the biggest of its kind, has stared into these empty patches and found nothing. Not faint, nothing. And on one plate, from April 12, 1950, the mystery stops being subtle. 9 of these points appear at once, clustered in a region of sky you could cover with a grain of rice held at arm's length. 9 star-bright flashes in one small corner, inside every exposure. Half an hour later, on the next plate, a familiar boring sky. In 70 years of looking, nothing has ever come back. 9 simultaneous flashes is not a lonely fluke. It's a behavior. And 2 summers later, that behavior picked a very strange week to repeat itself. In July of 1952, the United States Air Force was receiving about 15 UFO reports in an average month. That July, it received 536. On the weekend of July 19th, radar operators at Washington National Airport watched a cluster of unknown targets drift across the most restricted airspace in America. Over the White House, over the Capitol. Controllers at a second airfield saw them too, on separate radars. Fighter jets were scrambled. The targets were gone before they arrived, then back after the fuel ran low. 1 week later, it happened again. And this time pilots reported lights they could see with their own eyes, matching blips the radar saw with theirs. The Air Force called its largest press conference since the Second World War and offered an explanation. Temperature inversions. Warm air over cold, bending radar beams, painting ghosts on the screens. The press conference worked. The summer ended. The world moved on. Here is what nobody in that press room could have known. 3,000 kilometers away, on Palomar Mountain, the Sky Survey had been quietly exposing its plates through both of those weekends. On the night of July 19th, the first radar weekend, the plate with our 3 vanishing stars in a row. And on the second radar weekend, another plate, 5 transients arranged along a line, a pattern with roughly a 1 in 10,000 chance of assembling itself at random. 2 of the strangest nights in the history of American airspace. 2 of the strangest plates in the Palomar archive. The same 2 nights. No one connected them for 70 years, because no one knew the connection existed. The radar men never saw the plates. The astronomers never saw the radar. The archive just sat there, holding its evidence, waiting for someone to ask. When Villarreal's team proposed what these flashes might be, they chose the most testable explanation available: sunlight, glinting off flat, mirror-like objects in a high orbit. The way a distant window can blind you for an instant when the angle is right, an object above the Earth can catch the sun and flash, for less than a second, to a camera below. Our own satellites do it constantly. But a claim like that comes with a built-in trap, and this is the part I find genuinely beautiful. An object in orbit can only glint while the sun still touches it, swing behind the Earth, into our planet's shadow, and there is no sunlight left to reflect it. So if these flashes are glints, they should avoid the Earth's shadow, a cone of darkness stretching out behind the planet, invisible on any photograph, its position calculable to the meter for any night in history. A flaw in the glass doesn't know where the Earth's shadow is. The team mapped their 100,000 transients against the shadow's position, night by night, across 8 years of plates. The flashes avoid it. Roughly a third of the expected events are missing precisely where the shadow falls. A result so far beyond chance that the odds of coincidence sit below 1 in a trillion. And the geometry gives you more. For the shadow to matter the way it does in this data, the objects can't be close. They have to sit tens of thousands of kilometers up, out near the geosynchronous belt, the exact shelf of sky where humanity now parks its most valuable satellites. We arrived there in the 1960s and thought we were the first tenants. The plates suggest the address may have been occupied. If something was hanging silently over the Earth in those years, a fair question is, doing what? The team ran one more correlation, and it's the one I hesitated over because it sounds like science fiction. They took the dates of every atmospheric nuclear test in the plate era, 124 detonations, in the decade when mushroom clouds were a routine feature of the Nevada morning, and laid them against the dates of the flashes. The flashes are 68% more likely to appear on the day after the nuclear test. Not the day of, the day after, as if something took notice and came in for a closer look. The team also checked the sightings files. For every UFO report logged, the odds of a transient that day ticked up by another 8.5%. Small effects, but measured, published, and peer-reviewed. Words this subject has spent 80 years living without. There's an old idea about why the universe is silent. We told its story on this channel, the Dark Forest. Every civilization hiding because whoever makes noise gets found. In 1945, humanity stopped hiding. A nuclear flash is the brightest, sharpest thing this planet has produced in 4 billion years. And every test after the first was a drumbeat announcing that something on the third planet had learned physics. If the forest ever listened, that was the moment worth hearing, and the plates say the lights came out the morning after we beat the drum. Now sit in the other chair, because this is where the story earns its keep, or loses it. Nigel Hambley, an astronomer at the University of Edinburgh who has spent his career with photographic plates, looks at these flashes and sees something much closer to home: flaws in the emulsion. His sharpest point is this: most of the analysis has been done on scanned copies of the Palomar plates, and copies are made by pressing glass against glass in a dark room. A speck of dust, a pinhole, a chemical blemish in that process leaves, his words, a suspiciously pointy little star. Thousands of them sprinkled at random. And before you dismiss the contamination idea, hear the strangest true story the atomic age ever told about film. In August of 1945, Kodak started receiving complaints about X-ray film arriving fogged and speckled, straight from the factory. A company physicist traced the problem to the cardboard packaging, made from corn straw harvested near rivers 1,000 kilometers from a certain patch of New Mexico desert. Kodak's film had detected the Trinity test from halfway across a continent, weeks before the public knew the bomb existed. Film in that era could feel the atomic age in its bones. Anyone reading meaning into specs on 50s film has to answer for that. But the defect theory has homework of its own. A random blemish doesn't know where the Earth's shadow was on the night of the exposure. A pinhole doesn't know which weekend the radars over Washington were swarming. Chemistry doesn't check the calendar of nuclear tests before it decides to leave a mark. Although, in fairness, fallout drifting through a darkroom just might. Both sides agree on exactly one thing. The answer is sitting in storage at Palomar Observatory in the original glass, not the copies. Put the original flashes under a microscope and the case closes in an afternoon. Emulsion flaws look like nothing else once you're touching the actual plate. As of tonight, that examination has not been done. Somewhere on a shelf in California, there's a piece of glass that knows the answer. And one more detail for those who enjoy loose threads. The astronomer who sold the world the temperature inversion explanation, Harvard's Donald Menzel, also ordered part of Harvard's own plate archive destroyed around that same time. Plate historians literally call the hole in the record the Menzel Gap. The boring explanation is a tidy man clearing shelf space, and the boring explanation is probably true. But that year does keep doing this. Imagine for a moment that the wild version is true. It's a summer evening in '52. A family sits on a porch in Kansas, the war over, the radio murmuring, fireflies in the yard. 36,000 kilometers above their heads, something flat and bright and patient hangs in the darkness, taking its long, slow measure of a species that has just learned to burn cities in a single flash. It says nothing. It watches the deserts light up, one test at a time. And once in a while, at exactly the wrong angle, it catches the sun. And a camera on a mountain in California, built to photograph galaxies, accidentally photographs a visitor. Whether or not that picture is real, here is the part that is. We can never take those photographs again. Tonight, there are more than 10,000 active satellites overhead, and streaks of our own hardware cut through nearly every long exposure on Earth. If a quiet visitor flashed above us tonight, it would drown in a sea of our own reflections. The 50s sky was the last clean page, the only photograph of our doorstep from before we filled it with footprints. That is what makes a few boxes of old glass in California quietly priceless. A flaw in the glass, a trick of nature we haven't named, or visitors who came to watch the fire we started. The original plates are still on that shelf, and the moment someone puts them under a microscope, one of those 3 sentences becomes the truth. So leave your verdict in the comments, one letter. F for a flaw in the file. N for something natural we haven't understood yet. V for visitors. I'll be honest, in daylight, I vote F. At 3 in the morning, I'm not so sure. Until the next signal, keep watching the sky.